You don't understand. Elected with these people, they support me. Nope, sorry. I'm making up my own mind.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was turning around without killing myself.
No, we're not on the platform. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Starting mics around.
Budget workshops.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. No,
Just push the button?
No, it's underneath.
It lights up some. Oh, I got it. Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. So,
Okay. You want to give us
Yes.
the overview?
Okay, so we have our police department budget workshop. So I'll start by going through the changes we have. So the first line here, salary increases. I just want to point out, so the 94,546 is reflective of current salaries. So the reason it's so high is there were 4 police officers who during this year will go from PO2 to PO1. So that's step increases, and that alone, that jump is about 43,000. So the impact of that being for a full year next year, along with the additional officer that was added for the full year, that makes up the 94,546. So that doesn't include any salary increases. That's all in contingency as part of the negotiations.
Okay.
The next increase is overtime for 1,500 for additional plug-in days, and that's just a result of the contract and when they start. Sometimes plug-in days are part of overtime, and sometimes they have to just give the plug-in days on their own time. So that's what that is. The next.
plug-in day, sorry.
Plug-in day is a free training day.
Oh.
So depending on when you're hired, every employee was supposed to do 2 plug-in days. And now new employees, because of the contract, don't do any. So basically, we would have 2 days that we could assign officers to training for free. They wouldn't get paid overtime. But everybody hired, I think it's after 2019, doesn't have to do them anymore. So they get paid overtime. So with new hiring, new people, they don't have those free training days built into the contract, so we have to pay them overtime for the training that they do.
Thank you for the explanation.
The next line,
Sorry, can I just take you back to the very first line, which was the 100 line?
yes.
Is that increase, you described them categorically, but are those the new officers moving up to a higher rank, or those are other
So they would have been there for, I guess, about 4 years.
Oh, so it's more
3 or
senior
4
people.
years, yes.
So is there, and I'm jumping ahead here, but is there something that offsets that slightly by the fact that we have new officers that are junior level replacing other officers, or am I conflating two particular?
It can, because the new recruits would come in lower and then they gradually increase in step or decrease in step each year, and then they stop at PO1 unless there's a promotion.
Right.
And then it will kind of backfill. If there's a retirement, then someone would move in to sergeant or lieutenant.
So what I
I
just-
have that dynamic this year because you had
Right.
half of a brand new employee that was approved last year. So last year, the board approved an additional officer midway through the year, so that's half the salary in last year's budget and half is now showing up in this year's budget.
Got it,
So
okay.
anything you may have yielded because maybe you got a little bit younger with less experienced officers, you lost with that.
Okay, thank you.
Plus the step from 2 to 1 is a very large step.
The first 4 steps are pretty compact, and then the last step is large.
Then the next, this is a new overtime request. It's for active shooter training. and that would require 8 hours of overtime for 16 employees. And another new training request is for RMS training. Do you want to
Yeah.
describe what that is?
Just going back to the active shooter training, that's something that we're looking to do yearly. That's a skill that, is perishable, and there's new techniques that are being taught every year, so
You
that's
saw
something.
what happened at Kansas City, or maybe you didn't, in the midst of the parade for the
Parade,
Super
right.
Bowl. It's unbelievable.
So, that's something that we just started doing again this past year, that I want to continue to do each year, to keep everybody up to date on that. The RMS training is for the new records management system that we're working on with the county. It got delayed, it was supposed to be rolled out sometime in March, it's looking like it's gonna be towards the fall now. But as it gets closer to being put out, everybody's gonna need to be trained on how to use it. So this would be, likely just a one-time training for this year, and that would be it, just to get everybody up to speed on the new system.
It's amazing. It costs just as much to train records as to train active.
It's just, the hours and the.
Right, no, I mean, I
Yeah.
recognize it's just overtime.
The $1,300 crossing guard increase is reflective of current salaries. There's a $10,500 savings in longevity and unused sick time, and that's due to retirements and newer people coming in. There's some additional equipment requests, $2,500 for active shooter training equipment, $2,000 due to increases in vehicle costs. There's a savings of $2,000 in the CPR medical equipment replacements not needed. An additional $6,500 for an interior camera for the desk area and a hallway camera replacement. An increase of $1,500 in supplies based on actual hardware spending such as signage. An additional $1,500 for seminars, additional seminars and costs. $1,200 for membership dues for the enrollment in the county EAP program. Do you want to talk about that one?
Sure. So the county EAP, the Employee Assistance Program that you can enroll in, it costs, a certain amount of money per employee, but it gives them a bunch of resources they can reach out to anytime, numbers to call. They link you up with resources if you're having a hard time, need to talk to somebody. And it's completely confidential. There's no reporting requirements. They don't have to tell us they call. Nobody tells us if anybody calls. It's just a good resource to have to be able to offer to everybody as far as officer wellness.
I think there's several dozen communities around the county that are enrolled in the county's EAP, and we're not one of them.
I think it makes
It's a much
sense.
more robust program than what's offered through the health insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just scratches the surface.
It's an important thing to have for sure.
There's a savings of $2,100 because originally we were using a garage for storage, but now we're using 86 Main for storage. An increase in $2,700 for repair and maintenance of office equipment. That's based on actual usage of the copier. And it was budgeted too low this year, so this is to bring it to actuals. $14,200 to add dash cams, which was an item that was requested last year, and then it was pushed forward to this year.
I know I'm not supposed to do this at this stage, but I want to ask a question anyway. You have dash cams, not dash cams, you have cameras on the officers now. And what's the advantage of also having the dash
So basically the dash camera is two cameras. It's a forward-facing camera in the front of the vehicle, and then it's also an interior backseat camera where a person would sit, a suspect would sit. Last year, when I ran the numbers, we, between vehicle stops and vehicle accidents, we responded to, I forget what the exact numbers were, but about, I think, 40% of our call line dealt with vehicles in the roadway. So you get this additional footage during those encounters that you wouldn't have normally. The body cameras are more of a point of view type of camera, where this will catch a larger scene. So it might catch things that an officer sees when he turns his head, but wouldn't see otherwise. Additionally, would also, in an arrest situation, have somebody on camera the whole time, including during the transport, which we don't currently have. So that's some of the benefits to that program.
Thank you.
And that just, that would be a yearly cost.
It's 14,000 every year?
Yeah, it's a 5-year program for the equipment, software, and licensing, and maintenance, and storage. So it's that much each for 5 years.
Similar to the body cams.
Right.
Because it also accounts for storage.
And this covers every officer vehicle?
Every marked vehicle.
Marked patrol
Yeah.
car, okay.
We had any data about how often there are people in the back seats of our patrol cars?
So, yeah, I mean, I don't have the data handy, but it's something we could look up. Most of the time, it's either an arrest situation or what we call courtesy transport. Somebody's stuck or stranded somewhere and needs a ride. Would give them a courtesy transport, in town somewhere if they need it. So those would be the two main situations where you'd have it. I don't know the exact the numbers right now.
And we have $2,700 for the installation of new county radios. There would be 9 of them at $300 each.
Is that a one-time or is that a?
That's a one-time installation. I don't know if you remember the MOU that was proposed from the county for the radios that they're buying for everybody. In an effort to make sure everybody has communications throughout the county. So they purchased all the hardware. We would just be responsible for installing it and then, future years maintaining it.
$1,345 for Admit Impact.
That's our current records management system. That's our contract with them for maintenance and support, which this should be the last year. That's in there.
Then the $600 for TEC Solutions records is no longer needed. There's a $4,900 request for the purchase of new tasers. $8,000 for 4 new computers.
Can
So-
I ask you about the tasers? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is it is it because the current ones is it customary to replace them? Like, are the ones that we have just overused, don't work, or what's the deal?
They're not overused.
I mean, that was the question. Yeah.
They're not overused. No, they're, I think.
Can I borrow one?
We rent them out on the weekend. But, they're about 6 years old now. They're no longer making that model. They're going to continue supporting it for the next couple of years, but they don't make them anymore. And they're about 5 to 7 year end of life for tasers before they kind of become obsolete with their software. The new tasers, there's multiple different kinds of new tasers. The ones that we're looking to move to have been around for a little while. They've been out there for a little while. They're not the newest ones. Just an updated version, kind of a little bit better than what we have now. And this is, again, a yearly cost and a 5-year plan through Axon. And it would interface with our cameras, just like our ones that we have now. And they're also plug in and charge, where you don't have additional batteries that you need. So you dock them, they charge, you can pull them out. And that's for, I believe it's 6 tasers.
By better, you mean like you can control it better, there's like less chance of
So
incidents,
it's, so it's better, whereas the current ones we have, you have 1 cartridge in the front and that's it. It has 2 prongs. When you fire it, both prongs fire out, and that's the only shot you have. The new ones have double shots, where you could shoot single shots, so it could be more accurate. You could shoot less. You could have another opportunity with the same cartridge to get your target where you don't have now. So.
Do we, how often have the tasers, what would you say, have they been used?
Very infrequently. I mean,
Like in a given year?
0 most years.
0? Okay.
Yeah.
So just from a practical perspective, the ones that we have now, like if we didn't replace them like in a year or 2?
They would, we've had a couple issues with a few of them. We've sent them out. They've gotten fixed. They could last another year, not without it being an issue.
Mhm.
But they're getting to that point where should be addressed sooner than later, at some point in the near future. So, yeah. So
Nice to
that's
hear.
something we want to push for, another year. I don't see it being a huge problem.
So the 8,000 for 4 new computers, that's typically been budgeted for each year, but last year, since we had such a tight budget, there were no replacements done last year, so now they're back in this year's budget. And then
That's a rotating, right? You do 4 every year, so that they're all of them are replaced every 5 or 6 years.
Right, so yeah, each set, so not all of them are being replaced at the same time, it would be one section and then the next year, the next section, and spreads it out that way.
So the average life of a computer in that department is how many years?
Roughly 5 years.
do you want to go through the rest of the
Sure.
IT requests?
The $700 for the A1 server support increase is based on the 3 servers that they maintain for us. It's a monthly increase of about $20 per server for each one of those. The battery backup for the server room needs to be replaced. So when the power goes out or it goes to battery power for the changeover, we need a new battery backup for that. One of our servers is going to be out of warranty, so that's the $2,000 increase for yearly request for the warranty for that server. $3,000 for various repairs for A1. So the service contract only maintains certain things. When other stuff needs to be repaired or fix things for us, it's additional cost that we don't have budgeted for right now. So we took the hourly rate and just figured I think it was 20 additional hours throughout the year of help that we might need for various repairs. The data migration is part of the RMS project. The current RMS that we have, at some point that data is going to have to either migrate over to our new system or some type of legacy system is going to have to be initiated. And that's roughly the cost that they determined for labor that it would cost them to do that.
That's one time.
That's one time, yeah. The router update and backup circuit for RMS is a one-time cost as well, and that's just because our current router needs to be updated for the RMS because it's a countywide program, or not a countywide program, but multiple agencies within the county. It needs a backup circuit in case it goes out. The network security switches is again a one-time deal to update our switches for IT security. The memory for detectives' computers just based on discovery, they just need larger memory in their computers. The 2 computers in the detective division are being used. In maintenance vehicles, increasing car wash costs from our current car wash. And then uniforms is just the allowance for the additional officer that we're hiring.
Going forward, can we just get high school kids who need community service credit?
If we can find them, we'll take them.
The traffic control professional fees line, that's what we spend on the engineering services for the traffic monitoring. So this is reflective of current costs. Then in the parking department, so for the salary increases, it's reflective of current salaries, but then there's a request for a salary increase of an additional $15,000 to give our parking enforcement officer a dual title of PO and code enforcement officer. Just talk about that.
Yeah. So we have a parking enforcement officer now that's full-time. I see the need for potentially some additional code enforcement that could be done on a more civilian level than, police level, with the new legislation with the leaf blower ban coming to full effect and some other issues like loose dogs and various other village ordinances. The park enforcement officer had taken it upon himself just to take the code enforcement test, and he scored very well on it, and he's been canvassed for that in other areas. So the salary increase is kind of just consistent with other areas for that kind of role. So he would have time and ability while he's doing park enforcement to locate other village ordinance violations that are important and address those, without using a police officer resources. Obviously, we would be there to help him and assist him with it as he needs to, but he's out there driving around for park enforcement as it is. He has downtime where he's driving around looking for violations. He could be looking for additional violations and take enforcement action as he sees fit. In addition to, he could help out the building department by locating potential building code violations and notifying them of those so that they can respond to take a look at those as well.
But as far as the village code stuff, so you mentioned loose dogs and what was the other thing you said?
Leaf blowers.
Leaf blowers. Is
Yeah.
there anything else you see?
So those are two main ones that are pretty, in the forefront right now because of the law change, and just loose dogs are always kind of an issue. So those would be the two that I could see him really taking a lot of action on. And it could just be other various ones that come up here and there. It could be, tree permit stuff or, their landscaping permits and stuff like that. So I think with that, I was just gonna say with that title, I think he'd be able to enforce all village ordinances.
Do you know if his code enforcement training includes any face-to-face public interaction?
The training
Now
itself,
we'll have someone that's gonna be not necessarily a uniformed police officer that might be encountering either residents not happy about getting enforced, something of that nature.
I don't know the specific training. I do know it's a minimum of 1 week, and then I think there's up to 3 or 4 weeks that he could go to for the code enforcement part of it. I do think he deals with the public, a good amount now. I think people, he speaks with people quite frequently when he's issuing parking tickets, when they're, not always happy about that either. And like I said, we would be there to help him out through it, especially in the beginning. Depending on his comfortability level of dealing with them and interacting with them and things like that. So
In this position, he's not classified as a police officer. He's a civilian enforcement.
correct.
And the enforcement officer is full-time right now or part-time?
The parking enforcement officer
Yeah.
is full-time employee now.
So it wouldn't be any extra hours. It would be the extra duties that he's getting the money for.
Right. Same amount, same hours, just the extra title and duties.
Which he took the test to earn the right to, so to speak.
Yeah, he took the test and he's eligible unless from the county. So
Would he be responding to calls from headquarters that receive calls? I'm just thinking about what situations other than just driving around as the normal course of his route that he might have to respond to. So is he gonna get a call in his car saying there's a leaf blower complaint at my neighbor's house?
yeah, so we could utilize him in that aspect if it's like some type of like a leaf blower call like that, where you go. It would likely be a dual response, at least at first, to assess the situation, and then if it's just a clear leaf blower violation where some summons or something was gonna be issued, you'd be able to handle it at that point. But we would probably send a police officer with them at first, just to make sure it's not any type of neighbor dispute or anything else going on that would require a police presence, other than just the ordinance.
Right, I mean, those are the only kind of things I'm a little concerned about.
Right.
Is when there's a judgment call to be made with someone that's not a trained police officer.
Is he armed?
I mean, I guess I think I would like us to know sort of more about what we would want that to look like. I don't think we have really even discussed that, like what code enforcement would look like, or what codes we would want enforced, or what that looks like. So that, to me, is hard to kind of envision. Like, do I want a code enforcement officer like running after dogs? Like, there are 2 dogs that love running around my neighborhood. Like, is he going to be running around after those dogs? Like, what does that look like? Does he go find the owners? Does he like give a ticket to the owners? How many times? Like, I think there's a lot of like policy behind that like would have to be thought through before we give somebody a job without any real guidance. Like, I don't know how you go and enforce, I don't know how you could be a code enforcement officer without a lot of like policy guidance. I think that would be a very hard job to do. Like, go out there and enforce the code and like how and what do I do? That would be a really hard job.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand. You know, so you would go to school, you know, class to become a code enforcement officer where they would teach you a lot of, you know, what you have to do. But I understand what you're talking about as far as internally, what kind of how you would use it and respond to things. So we could have definitely a larger discussion how that looks to see if it's something, you know, that would be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, like what from it's one thing to go to school to like know how to do something, but it's like, what are you enforcing here? Right, and what policies we want him to enforce. So what does that look like, right? We even had a lot of discussions about the leaf blower, gas leaf blower ban, right? And how you enforce. I mean, we talked a lot about even the police officers, like knowing what to do or not to do. And I think there's a lot of discussion on that. So I think it would be very difficult. That would be a very difficult job to do because there's a lot of policy that's sort of like not really developed. So it's hard to enforce something when there's not a policy, kind of like what you said about the leaf blower ban, right? Like you go to someone's house and the police don't know, like, what do you do? Who am I giving a ticket to? I'm not really sure. So that would be difficult.
Well, that's why I
Well,
asked
I mean,
you.
the laws are on the books, so.
Yeah.
I'm not saying,
I know the laws were on the book for the leaf blower ban, but they had the same issue,
right,
right? So like, unless we're clear on the policy and like what we want to enforce, then it's still hard.
Well, that's why I asked about what other things, because I
Yeah.
thought the board should have kind of a say in what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, you know, the way I envision it is an additional resource to help us address the issues that are, you know, currently being, you know, talked about, which is like the leaf blowers, a lot of the dog stuff. It's not so much a position, because he's still doing parking too, it's a dual responsibility, he's still very active with the parking enforcement. So it's an additional resource for us to utilize for certain issues when they arise. It's not to say he's gonna take the code book out and start, you know, looking through it and trying to figure out ways to, you know, write people tickets for it. It's more as a resource we could utilize to free up police officers for other stuff, to have, you know, more of a civilian position to handle some issues that they're capable of handling, while we attend to things that you need a police officer for. So
See, this is the first time hearing about the dog problem. So basically the problem is that people have dogs, but they don't have them on a leash.
Yeah,
Right, gotcha.
basically.
So they're just walking down Main Street with their dog without a
Not so
leash?
much Main Street, you know, Aqueduct,
Oh, I
going to
see.
school, that
Gotcha,
happens a lot
gotcha.
going to school, or, you know, people, they're repeat offenders of like
Exactly.
loose
You would
dogs,
know.
which is like, you know, like you said, like your dog's, somebody in your neighborhood, the dogs get out and run around. We'd find out who owns them and we'd talk to them, and then maybe the next time happens, maybe they'd get a ticket for it, you know, stuff like that.
I was just trying to get my head around what the problem was, because I
Yeah.
didn't know about it. So.
It's always been a problem.
Come
though.
hang out on Riverview. You can walk with Mary.
I was just curious, like, what do you do with things like noise complaints, or is that something you'd always want to have a police officer handle?
No, probably, you know, in just the nature of the time he works, it probably wouldn't come up very often,
Right.
because noise complaints are generally in the evenings, his hours would still be the same. So probably wouldn't come up a lot, but that's something I probably wouldn't have him handle, just because it's usually a little bit more contentious
Right.
than, a
well,
legal lower.
yeah, and the code is not well written, as
Right.
you know, and we haven't been able to write it well, so. Clearing of snow and sidewalks is another timely example. Right.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. See, that's something obviously I could present
Well, Frank, maybe you could.
for safety.
Could sort of come up with a list of the issues that you'd like the board to sort of discuss and give a red light or green light.
Yeah, but that's nothing as a safety issue. That immediately comes out of me. It's like, that's worth paying for, you know, because as someone who walks around the sidewalks a lot, you know, it's tough when you get to a house and they haven't cleared it, and there's ice and you're slipping around, and, you know, and that's obviously, it would be great to have someone looking into that.
Thanks, Frank.
Absolutely.
Then just the last line here is there's the elimination of the need for the 2,400 sick vacation coverage, because when the parking enforcement officer is out, it's usually just handled by the police overtime line.
Well, we don't pay somebody overtime to do it, it's just we handle it with, you know, the personnel that we have. Yeah, it's we can.
Someone gets an assignment they don't want for the day.
I just realized.
So.
I just realized like I'm clear, so it's my
I
dying
thought
computer.
I got a question
Yeah.
on, it's line 3120010, which is OT.
Okay.
What, if anything, can we do to bring down overtime? put differently, what are we doing wrong? Not you, but, you know, what are we asking you to do that is negatively impacting that
Oh, the
number?
overtime?
Because that's a big number.
So,
Overtime. It's,
The 1,500, 11,500, and 11,500.
no, it's not the summary.
On the details, I was on.
Oh,
Oh,
here,
thanks.
so
It's like the second page.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, so,
3120 dot.
regular overtime, that 311,950, yeah.
so our overtime breakdown basically, for the last 2 years, and it's pretty consistent over the last 2 years, aside from one category, is vacation. Contractually, vacation is about 25% of our overtime budget, and sick is about 23% of our overtime budget. So between those two items, alone is about half of the overtime budget for the year. Training is roughly 15% of the overtime budget. Investigations is roughly 7% of the overtime budget.
I mean, someone's actively investigating something, their shift ends, but they can't leave because they're in the middle of something.
Yeah. Special events is about 6%. And then military and family leave, roughly 5 to 7%, but this past year was up to 15%. We had somebody out on military leave for an extended period of time. And we also had more people out on family medical leave act for a little bit extended period of time.
And that's done as OT?
If somebody's out, and it causes a shortage in the tour.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's the impact on the other people, I'm
Right.
sorry.
Right, so,
Yeah.
so basically, like vacation, sick, any other leave, it's to fill the positions that are vacant because of that. Training is the cost to send people to training plus or backfill the position if we need to. And then, you know, there's about 10% that fall into like another category, which is a bunch of little categories that add up.
So if I want to save money, we can cancel all special events, basically.
One thing to point out is, when you look at the past history, it's not at all comparable if you look at the actual numbers.
Yeah.
So for example, 930,000, 972,000, and this year already 685. That is all reimbursable overtime, mostly from Con Edison, as you know.
Yeah.
So as that gets incurred and is reimbursed, the budgets are modified to bring that up.
And those would presumably fall into what you have there as regular overtime. So it's some subset of that.
It goes on the top of everything. So
Yeah.
what we're budgeting is a normal year without any overtime for Con Edison,
Got it.
right? I mean, that's what
Yes.
that number, that's what that
Yes.
budget number is.
That's our
And then
anticipation.
as it's incurred and we're reimbursed for it, which we're reimbursed basically dollar for dollar, we raise the budgets, you know, on both sides.
Those are the entries that frequently come up in the consent agenda.
I didn't want you to think we were cutting it by a third or something.
Yes,
It's
got it.
really just reacting to Con Ed.
Let's see, 3120.0456. If you can find it faster than I can, I'll be able to look at it. Repairs and maintenance. So that, my initial reaction was that one also kind of went up steeply, even assuming I take your actual to date and multiply it by 1.5. Or maybe it's not huge, but.
Well, it's the 14,200 for the dash cam, that'll
Yeah.
make
Right.
up a good chunk of that.
And the tasers, I think, are right.
The tasers and the new radios.
Got it, so it's the items you hit up top, okay.
Yeah, it would probably be the tasers and the dash cameras that would
Okay.
probably make the big chunk of that.
If you else want to jump in while I'm scrolling, they're welcome to, but I. 3120.0410, so you gotta go back up a little bit. Are these pretty consistent expenses? It's not a huge increase, but from, again, just doing the math from where we are right now puts you at $22,000. So you got an extra $6,000. And that may be a completely unfair way for me to do it. I'm just taking the actuals to date and annualizing them.
Yeah, so we usually don't do our ammunition order until spring, after our spring firearms, because we take inventory at that point, see what we need. So that's where usually we have a close to end of year order for ammunition. Same with tasers too. Medical supplies is throughout the year, and the hardware and community events kind of go out throughout the year. But the two top lines are usually towards the end of the year purchase.
And the ammunition, that's for training, obviously, you're not using $14,000 worth of ammunition.
No, that's, yeah, and that includes a lot of the range equipment and stuff like that too. So it's not just ammunition, but it's stuff that you utilize at the firearms range.
I have a dumb question. I guess when you go to a firing range, you're paying for ammunition there too. Or is that part of what you pay for when you rent?
We have the range here that we
No,
utilize.
I know, I'm just asking.
You could probably bring your own ammunition.
Or you buy
Certain
it.
places, it depends maybe on their rules, I don't know. Or you'd have to meet their specifications for the type of ammunition, so. I don't know specifically for each place, but I know if you go to the county police range, you can bring your own ammunition.
If you're a police officer.
Well, right, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about, yeah.
Because the private ranges, I would imagine they have to have all kinds of rules, they don't want people coming in and
Correct,
shooting.
you have
they
to
don't want
meet
you
their
shooting.
specifications, and they probably prefer to sell to you, because I'm sure, you know.
They make a profit.
How about 0473, 3120-0473, which is maintenance of vehicles. So your actuals, I don't know, puts you 12, 13 grand. Again, on a math only basis, what's your expectation that's gonna happen in the next couple of months that'll drive that to the 19,400?
Yeah, so that's, that one's kind of hit or miss depending on, one repair could be half of that, any given year. So that's just kind of like basically an average over the past few years of kind of where we ended up. So we are replacing some of the older cars with newer cars right now. So in theory, we should be better off, but we've had some pretty good repairs this year for some of the older cars before they go out of service.
We also haven't had a car wash bill
Right.
yet this year,
Okay.
so that was part of it, yeah.
Okay.
Do they come to you to wash the cars?
No.
Oh, you have to bring it?
Yeah, currently we're going to one location, but we're gonna be having to switch to another location, so that's the increase was.
What's the benefit of the new location? It's closer? Or?
No, I don't know how to explain it.
We can't, we can't really use the current location anymore. We got a letter in the mail.
So, better find it. The second location is actually further, it's actually.
I don't want to
closer
say
for us,
too, I don't want to say
Right.
too much, yeah.
So, yeah, it's
New
actually
York State issue, right?
Yeah, New
Yeah,
York
New
State
York State.
issue.
a little bit further away, it's a little worse for us, but it's only other options, so.
Anybody else have any other
What's
questions?
the traffic engineering line?
So that's, yeah,
With the traffic issue.
yeah, so what we do is we have a radar unit that we use to gather data inconspicuously. It's not one of the marked things on the side of a road, it's a little box that's mounted to a pole. And it gathers data for a variety of locations out there, probably 10 or 11 different locations that we rotate amongst. And that data tells us, traffic volume, speed, best times for enforcement. It tells us if we have a problem at a particular location. We've been doing this for a number of years. And frankly, it started out at the beginning where I was actually going out and mounting the box up for a while, so got away from that. And
Right, that's when it wasn't working.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But we're using our engineer to do that, to not just mount it, but to download the data, reset the unit, produce the reports that are needed, so that it's really turnkey for us. We don't have that kind of expertise in-house.
And that, this has come up before, when we've had other issues with like areas that we were concerned about and stuff, you've always had that data, that's from this, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, we move it around, we have set locations that we like to keep an eye on, but then when complaints come in, we'll deploy it to certain areas to collect data on those, you know, to formulate our plan from that and use it to talk to the community about, you know,
That's what I'm
issues or
saying.
lack of issues or.
I don't want to say complaints, but you said it, so yes.
Well, the discussions out on Sycamore Lane were a perfect example of that, where we knew the exact data going eastbound and westbound, and, you know, so it helped formulate our decisions on Parkside Way.
Helps give the bond, you know, speed, is their best time of day.
I don't think we have like a revenue line for the police department. It's probably the court revenue.
You do, it's the justice court.
Yeah.
But do we have any idea the kind of dollars that are received by the village for parking violations? And you know, I'm just trying to think about, you know, Eddie's done a great job, and he's been in life for 3 years now.
Probably somewhere 2.5, 3 years.
Right, so is there like a
Just coming out of the
comparison
pandemic,
before Eddie and after Eddie as to what the increase in ticketing and for lack of a better term, revenue, right? You know, perhaps to offset an increase in salary that we can give them for code enforcement. So I don't know if we need or can get a dollar value, but you know, I mean, I see them all over the place, so.
Right.
Right.
I mean, the only issue with that is that we're not trying to give him a raise for parking and for
Right, yeah.
enforcement.
But no, I
Well,
wasn't.
that's why if you're looking historically, it
Right.
might be some insight, that's all, instead of encouraging something you didn't want to encourage.
Additionally, along the same lines, the building department said that having somebody out there reporting other building department issues that they can respond to would likely increase their revenues as well, so. By
Potential violations, right?
for potential violations.
So that doesn't mean going to a building site and walking through a building. So we're talking about, you know, observing construction vehicles, material deliveries, things like that would be a sign for construction taking place. Dumpsters, you know, that might be placed, and then the building department would follow up and obviously determine if there's a permit or no permit or what's going on.
But none of that revenue runs through your department, so you don't see it, like you don't know how much the traffic enforcement officer has collected, right, because that comes through the courts. Right.
Yeah, but we can get the parking information directly from the
From
board.
them, yeah.
Because there's a combination, the revenue that flows through there is a combination of parking, but also moving violations, which is, you know, not the parking enforcement officer, it's
Right.
the police.
I mean, I guess I would like to see that like well formulated and what we want to happen. You know what I mean? Like I would prefer us to kind of like know what, say like, here's what we want this to look like, and that's why we're doing it, rather than he got a code enforcement thing and we think he could do X, Y, or Z. Like, I think if I was a resident listening to this discussion, that would not make me happy. I think it would be like, we feel like there's this need that he can fill, and therefore he's doing X, Y, and Z. I think that's a better way to frame this.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to be mindful of that, right?
Yes, we wouldn't be doing this to increase revenue, is that what you're saying?
That we wouldn't be doing it to increase revenue, or he's done a great job and therefore he deserves an increase in pay, and therefore, right? And let's find some things for him to run after a resident. Like, I don't think, you know, like,
No, I don't think any of us are saying.
we're not saying that, but I'm saying I don't want it to be perceived that way.
Right.
Right? I think we have to be very careful. I think we have to think, here's the need, and this is what we're filling.
Yeah, I mean, the history of having a full-time parking enforcement officer is exactly what you said, which is the board spent an awful lot of time revising the parking regulations in the downtown especially. And coming out of it, the single biggest complaint was that why bother going through this if you're not going to enforce it properly? So the board put the resources behind it to enforce that. So the question then is, and we'll come up with a rationale, proper rationale for some of the other village code violations that we're looking at.
So I would, so to me, that would be the rational way to do that.
Exactly, yeah.
That would make sense, yeah.
And I think that has to be another discussion away from the budget, just because that's a policy decision.
My recollection is that historically, a lot of the problems were due to folks coming for the train and parking on side streets or elsewhere. I'm sure there are plenty of other violations, but presumably a lot of that dropped away with COVID. Do we see that coming back now?
Yeah, I mean,
You know, I don't,
And I know you gotta pull the data, so I'm not asking you to.
right, it's hard to even kind of figure that out because when you rent a parking ticket, it's just a car and a plate, and that's it. You don't know where they are, you don't know what they're doing. But we don't get a lot of phone call complaints on parking so much because he's doing a good job out there and
I
doing
think
the
he's pretty
tickets.
I think he's pretty effective at giving tickets.
Right, so I think
So-
if there is a problem, he's probably addressed it, but people aren't calling to complain about, hey, I just saw somebody park on my street and walk to the train, like they used to, probably because he's out there doing it, so. It's kind of hard to say one way or another, but I would imagine he's done a pretty good job of combating that.
and also we don't have, well, Metro North doesn't have a waiting list for the Metro, for the main parking lot anymore.
Yeah, it's changed.
I don't think they've
The
had it since
dynamics have
2019,
changed a little
you know?
bit, yeah.
So yeah, you don't have that dynamic there.
Okay.
But there's plenty of other violations.
I don't have any more questions. If anybody else does, you're
No.
welcome. Okay. So you want to switch, you had an update on recommendations from the plan for reform and reimagining the Irvington Police Department.
Yep.
Same speaker.
So just switching gears to the police reform recommendations and just going over a few of the ones that you know we might have spoke about in the past, but one of them that you know we kind of just talked about it was officer wellness and mandating officer wellness screenings for officers in traumatic situations. And we talked about in the past how it's hard to mandate somebody, to do that because it could lead to issues with the unions and stuff. But it is something we do offer if somebody goes through a traumatic incident. We offer services to them, whether they want to speak with somebody, we give them the information. We don't, once again, we don't follow up. We don't, make calls for them because it's confidential. And this goes kind of hand in hand with the request for the EAP. So it's just another resource that we could put out there. It's one phone number that gets stored in their phones. They could call it 24/7, while they're working, while they're not working. And it just kind of adds to our officer wellness policy and available resources that we can give them. So while we can't mandate it, we do offer it and we encourage people to reach out when they need help. So that was the one in that section I wanted to just briefly touch on. The other one in this section that says in process, which is enhancing leadership training at all levels. This is when supervisors get promoted, they go to school for supervisor school. Same thing. It's easier to find leadership training for the top of the department, sergeants and above. It's a little bit more difficult to get leadership training, at the line officers. But what I realized is looking through the courses that we take throughout the year, a lot of courses have built-in leadership qualities in them. Whether it's active shooter, has a leadership component in it about, hey, you might be the most rookie cop we have, but you might be the first one there, and you have to deal with it. And they teach you how to deal with that type of burden. Community resource officer school that we sent somebody to this past year was about connecting with community, but also being a leader within the department and showing how we connect with the community to other officers. So a lot of the courses that we do take throughout the year have leadership training in them, even though they're not specifically dedicated leadership classes. So, for that to be in process, it's just continual over the year of different training that we do that have different leadership stuff in it. On top of that, when I find things, I try to send it out to everybody. Like recently, I was talking to Larry about this the other day. Police One, which is like an online training site, had a leadership page that had 12 articles linked to it with all about police leadership. I sent it out to everybody in the department, just they could read it at their leisure. It wasn't a long read. Each article was 5-10 minutes. It wasn't too much, but if each one touched on a different topic of police leadership, and you want to read it, it's right there for you, just click on it and read it. I didn't mandate it, but it's available if you want it. So when I find things like that, I try to send it out too. And I do it to everybody. It's not just, the supervisors, it's for everybody, because you could have a tour where it's the 3 most rookie police officers that you have, and somebody has to be a leader in that tour and take control if something happens, so.
Do you find that the officers want this kind of training? Is it something that they seem to embrace, or is it something that they kind of?
No, I think they all embrace leadership training. I haven't really had any pushback in some of the training, especially the leadership they didn't like. It's usually pretty good training, so.
It's good to hear.
If anybody has any questions on a specific topic that you see up here, just let me know. And like I said, I'm just going to touch on a few of the ones that have changed since then. The dash cameras, obviously, we just spoke about those, and I'll get some more information for you, Larry, about the amount of times people are in the cars for that. But, that's one of the recommendations from the committee that we wanted to move forward with. Moving down to exit interviews, this is in process. It could probably be expanded upon, and I was thinking about it the other day, even to a point where if we were able to make like Google form or like a survey kind of form online, that even if the people have left already, maybe you could send it to them and they could fill it out at their leisure. You might get some value out of that back from them. So we could even go back to the last people that left, send it to them, ask them to fill it out, and try to get some value back from their experiences.
If they're in-person interviews, who does them? Somebody who's on the force already?
So we don't know. We don't have internal exit interviews currently.
Good.
So,
Because otherwise, I was going to suggest you have a civilian participant. You mean you don't do them at all?
no, not internally. And I think part of the recommendation of the committee was that it be outside of the police department.
That's what I was going to say. So the committee's one step ahead of me. Okay.
Yeah.
We've had some pretty senior people leave recently, right? It would be really interesting to have their feedback and things.
Yeah, we're gonna try to simplify the process too,
Right.
not necessarily forcing an in-person interview, but at least getting some feedback through some sort of a form. So at least it'll alert you to a problem if there is one. And then you can follow up further after that.
Has there been a survey of the police officers since the original survey was done?
No, and that's on the list too down here. We're coming up on the 3-year mark for the police officer survey and also the community survey. So that's on the list towards the bottom there, which listen, it's not difficult. It's just
I was trying to see.
Yeah.
It seems like, but I don't want to guess. There's been a lot of turnover in the last 3 years, hasn't there?
yeah, there's been some turnover, and we've had a lot of new people come in. So
It would be interesting to see, to compare. Sorry, it's the college professor and me, researcher, coming out. It'd be interesting to compare the changes. If things are moving in one way or the other.
right, yeah. So I think we're coming up on 3 years now for both of those. So it's just a matter of figuring out what that looks like, how to implement that and get it moving.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion that the board probably has to have to try to figure out exactly how to do this. The first time around, we had some volunteer assistance and a committee that was kind of overseeing that process, but we don't necessarily have that. So we've got to try to replicate the survey 3 years later. So it may take some professional help. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, we may consider just asking people who were on that committee if they're interested in, like, I think one of the things we talked about on that committee was like ongoing, remember? And we never really followed up, but I bet you that there's interest of people who were sitting on that committee to sort of continue, or maybe to like some subset of that committee.
Well, I was more thinking about just the fine point mechanics of actually running a survey, because it's
Right.
not so easy.
I mean, I was thinking Kathy Kaufman.
Well, of course, yeah. No, understood, but.
I was thinking drafting Kathy Kaufman.
Right.
Another academic, great.
Who did
And
those?
look, if it
Yeah.
takes that direction, that's totally fine with that, but that needs to be figured out, that's all I'm saying.
She did the survey, right?
She did,
She
yeah.
did it?
And she seemed to have some knowledge and training about it. So it's not something that, you know, there's anyone on staff internally that can
Yeah.
just run a survey that's, you know, that'll yield valid results, you know.
No quantitative PhDs on site.
I doubt. So, we heavily relied on Kathy, as you said. But I think the goal here is, and then I'm assuming I'm hearing that there's agreement that we need to do this. And so we'll just try to sit down and figure out exactly how that takes place, whether it's with some sort of volunteer, or whether it's with a professional. Excuse me, paid professional.
Jumping back up just a little bit to policy and procedure.
Sorry, I know I'm jumping around here. Other route.
We pursuing the law enforcement accreditation program. We're still working through that. We have there's 111 standards. Out of the 111, we have 87 policies done that meet the requirements that they need to. So we have roughly 80% of our policies are in place. The other 20% we have policies on, but we have to review them and either, you know, see that they're okay or update them to make sure they're up to best practices. Once that's done, then we have to, some of it's done already, but find compliance that we're proving our compliance to each of those standards, whether that's, you know, records or interviews and pictures or, you know, depending on what the standard is. So once that's done, we're hoping our timeline is to have some type of mock assessment, which is basically another agency will come in and take a look at what we're doing and how we're doing it and give us some feedback that's accredited already and tell us, yeah, everything looks good, or hey, you need to tighten up on a few things or do this a little bit differently. And then hoping to have our assessment done by the state sometime later this year, the late fall, where they would come in for 3 days and pick everything apart, look at every single policy, every single thing we do, pretty much live in here for 3 days and let us know if we're doing it right or if we need to change anything.
Do you find the reviews helpful beyond the accreditation side? Do you find them helpful?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Sorry, are these reviews you're doing of policy and
Oh, yeah.
is it? Do you
Yeah,
find them-
I find it extremely helpful. I see, you know, where we've lacked, you know, in certain policies where they were too vague. I've seen other policies where they're too, you know, too deep into the weeds. Some that are just outdated, that just haven't been kept up with, that, you know, laws change, things change, that need to be updated. So it was definitely due, you know, and this forces your hand to do it. So that's what the program does.
And we have an officer, I believe, a lieutenant, who is sort of in charge of this whole program.
Correct. So currently, Lieutenant Mike Foley is now in charge of the program. Was Lieutenant Johnson, but then he was reassigned to the records management system project. So that's why it took a little bit of a lapse in the accreditation. So we've now assigned records management to a sergeant who's dealing with it. So now the lieutenant can be full-time working, you know, on accreditation. So it should speed up again. Like I said, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have our state assessment and we'll know if we're doing good or not. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on, it says done up there, but it was the recommendation about replicating Westchester County Police's Community Together program that I believe is in Mount Kisco. So we looking into that program a little bit more. It's a little bit different for them. Mount Kisco doesn't have a local police department. It's the county police, and the county police and the population, you know, when they took it over, they didn't know each other. What happens here was having a local police department in the community. We're already embedded in the community. We're ready to go to all the community functions. We host community events, participate in all the school events. We do daily walkthroughs of the schools and the parks. So a lot of the things that they're doing to connect with the community is stuff we already do. While we don't have a name for it or, you know, something we call it, it's basically what we call community policing. We call it park walk and talks. Park your car, you get out, you walk, talk to people. School walkthroughs, we do the coffees with the cops, the colors with the cops, you know, the health fair, the reading to kids, you know, we just, anything we could be involved with, we try to be involved with. The Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts coming to headquarters, getting tours. It's all very much the same spirit of that program is what we're doing here, right? So, while we can't replicate what they, you know, exactly call their program, we do the same stuff.
I saw you on the read aloud day last night because I did it also.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So That's always fun. Yeah, they don't really care too much about the books so much, they just want to ask a bunch of questions. Those are the ones I wanted to touch on, but if you, like I said, if you have any questions on any of the other ones that are up there, let me know. And
I have a general question, which may or may not be up there. And the active shooter training mentioned earlier brings this to mind. I'm afraid this is a question. Do you have a manual or a policy that would apply for sort of emergency management situations? Let's say you do have an active shooter, you have a bank robbery or something of that sort. You know, I won't pretend that I know police procedure, but who's in charge on site, who gets called, and so on.
yeah, so we do have policies on that. We also have a mutual aid plan for us in all of Westchester County about, you know, if you had some major incident, it's like a 30-page plan, and you basically would go right to the plan, and it lines out exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it. All officers have incident command structure, all supervisors and recruits get basic level stuff in the academy. So, you know, our policies are pretty straightforward. You know, whoever's the most ranking senior officer on scene is going to take control of the scene. It's still being relieved by a high-ranking individual, but we always maintain control of scenes that happen in Irvington by the Irvington Police. We might call in other assets to help us, but ultimate decisions are always made by us. We might, you know, take their recommendations into, you know, consideration when doing it, but they're not going to make the decisions in our town, and that goes for when we go to other towns too. So we do have policies on how to respond and what resources should be called and how they're called and who's in charge and everything else.
Thank you.
So one of the things we were talking about a little bit this week is the kind of this update that you just got, what that looks like going forward. I think you can see from the list that, you know, the vast majority of the recommendations have either been implemented or there may be some that just can't, but the vast majority have been implemented. So I think, you know, rather than, you know, have kind of a more formal walkthrough process like this, the chief will just keep you updated on the important items that are going on, like accreditation and things like that. I mean, unless you see it differently, but to walk through all of these and they're all labeled done is,
Yeah, well, the only one that's not done says trustees.
well, that one, yeah. No, there's a few that aren't though, but it's yeah, that's the one that Arlene referred to, so.
And if, you know, at any time anybody has any questions or wants more information or has any insight that they want to share about any of them, I'm always available, so.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You were good with giving out information.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for the late night.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for that.
So the next one I think is yours, right, Larry?
Yeah, it's a pretty easy one.
Famous
Are you
last
under the
words.
Excuse me?
Are you under the weather?
I'm a little bit, feeling a little congested, but
Could have zoomed in.
no, it's okay. No, it's fine. Just counting as soon as
Okay. Been there.
That'll knock you out.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so this item relates to a relatively minor change in the tax exemption, property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. So a little bit of the history on it, and I'm not a student of these tax exemptions. I don't want to pretend to be an assessor, but the state passed a revised ambulance worker firefighter exemption. It basically replaced an entire chapter of the law that we were following originally. But the net effect of it is that there's still, it's still the same basic exemption, which is a 10% property tax abatement for enrolled members of the fire department or ambulance corps. The only thing that the law really did is it introduced a couple of different options that are selectable by us, by the local municipality. Greenberg, for I guess obvious reasons, is trying to get all of the villages to be somewhat standard. Otherwise, the processing of applications is just unwieldy, where one community might have one option selected, another one has another option, and Greenberg is on top of all of that. So the basic option that I can outline is that the exemption now can apply for members of the fire or ambulance who are members for as little as 2 years. So this is at the top of the back of this page. I guess it's section D, but it's actually on the back. And the previous law only was 5 years, and that was it. There were no options. Now the option could go down as low as 2 years. And based upon the conversations that we've had with both Greenberg and the other Greenberg villages, everyone's choosing the 2-year option to make it a little bit more accessible for people. So that's one option. And by the way, I'm telling you this, you can choose whatever option you want. I'm just giving you the background and the context of it.
You want more rather than less.
That's what I was just saying. We've had both agencies in here saying about recruitment, so
Right. Yeah. So that makes sense, and that's why we drafted it that way, and I think that's why the other communities went that direction as well, or are going that way. The other option is simply to lay out the parameters of when an unremarried spouse of a deceased department member exists. So a fire department member passes away. There are 2 scenarios that are being covered by these paragraphs. This is section 3A, B, and C. Two basic scenarios are if a enrolled member is killed during the line of duty, which obviously we all hope doesn't happen, but if that happens, then the unremarried spouse would be able to continue with that same tax exemption on their property. And that would happen if they have at least 5 years of service. Okay, so this is one case.
because I saw I was about to ask you, and you beat me to it. Why?
Yeah, there's the best I can tell from the conversation, and we did have this conversation while you were there, but you didn't really have the background, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
how much of it made sense. But the best I can say is that the communities are trying to strike a balance between pouring on added exemptions and the fact that the rest of the community has to support those exemptions, by making up for the tax dollars, right? So the best way I can say it is they didn't choose the most liberal options available in all cases, and this is one of those examples where they put some sort of a limit on that scenario, and 5 years is what's being discussed.
I guess the only reason I said it is because if the policy is being changed to 2 years, so now you're saying somebody could qualify for the policy, get killed in the line of duty, but have the spouse not eligible to maintain the exemption. Right? And the number of times this will actually happen is going to be very close to zero. So I don't know. It just seems to me those numbers should be the same, is what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying.
What I'm not 100% sure of, and I'll check on it, is I'll check to see how much leeway we have on that number of years.
Maybe not.
There could be some hard-coded numbers in the law, which I'll look at.
Yeah.
But I'll
If it is,
double
it
check on
is,
that.
but-
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You understand my logic here,
Yeah,
right? It's
I
like,
do,
oh, you were killed, I'm really, really sorry. Sorry you weren't here long enough, so,
yeah.
I mean.
And then, so the second scenario, I'll check on that, of course.
Well, hold on, why doesn't C address that? C. Swelter has been receiving the exemption prior to his or her death, so you could get it after 2 years.
But not be eligible under Part C. I think the idea was, because you have to satisfy A, B, and C.
They're all A, B, and C,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
I think what C's trying to
Trying to figure out
prevent
how C,
is that if you were a firefighter and you didn't get the exemption and then you die, and then the 2 years go out and apply for it post-death, I think is what
I
they're
think it's
trying
bad
to do.
drafting. I think this is bad drafting.
The C?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm giving them too much credit?
Yeah, because I think if you were a volunteer for 5 years, I mean, I guess you would have had to apply for it.
yeah,
That's-
so
that's-
you
that's-
failed on a technicality,
Right.
so they're catching you.
Right.
Right. If
We're
you didn't
giving them
apply for it
credit.
before, we're
I
not
mean,
gonna give it to you now.
Larry, does that make sense
Yes.
to you? Okay.
Yeah, I guess it is that you will have had to apply for it, because
That's
I
what I
guess
thought.
theoretically you could have been
Okay.
serving and never applied.
Okay.
Right, and they don't want the spouse to be able to say, oh,
By the way,
yeah, but exactly.
I would have applied.
Again, such a narrow situation that like, but okay. I'm more upset about B than C, you know.
Yeah, and I'll find out about that, see if there's any movement on that. And so the other scenario that's not covered in this drafting here is that there's some debate about the way the New York State law was drafted as to whether it would allow for an unremarried spouse to continue with coverage just for an ordinary death of their spouse. And I don't believe we're addressing that here, and I think there's at least one other community that believes that the law allows for that, but NICOM and Greenberg and some other entities don't think that the law actually allows for that, so.
But is there other stuff, because it says right here, it has to be killed in the line of duty, so is there other parts of the law?
Not covered in here, he said not covered.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
I'm
no,
sorry,
so-
it's not part of, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay.
Right, so there was discussion about whether the New York State law allows the unremarried spouse exemption to be given to just someone in an ordinary death,
Right.
as an ordinary death benefit.
But why would the
Not
section be added if it's, do you see what I'm saying? If it was allowed, then you wouldn't need that language.
That's why we didn't end up putting it in
Oh,
here.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I think that the New York State law doesn't even allow for that.
Okay.
So,
And if it does, somebody will clarify it
and
and change
and
the
that's
law,
bad
or-
driving.
we'll be back here talking about it,
Yeah.
right? So
Because
that's the only
bad
other
driving.
scenario.
Yeah,
Well, how many lawyers are in that other village that thought?
Enough lawyers, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll make our judgment.
Yeah, I won't get into
We
the
have 3
individual.
lawyers.
I won't get into the individual villages, but it's, you know, it's good fodder at our meetings, sure. So, subject to the answer to the one question that came up, you know, this really needs to be adopted by the end of March, so there's not a huge time crunch, but the town assessor would really like to at least understand what direction we're going, so that she can prepare for the applications that are coming in. It's more about being able to serve the public. When someone comes in and asks a question, right now she's gonna say, well, here's our exemption, but I don't know what Irvington's gonna do.
Right.
So it's more.
So your ask is that we announce a public hearing at February 28th, and
Right, subject to the one question. I
Yeah,
answered.
yeah,
But
understood.
yes, it would be an announcement at the 28th. Probably not enough time to have the hearing on March 4th or 5th, because it's too close.
Yeah.
Our meetings are too close. So it would be the second meeting in March.
okay.
It's very unusual for us to have those 2 meetings close together, so
Well,
it's
it's because of
causing
the holiday.
Yeah, I know it's causing
vacation.
the occasional hiccup.
That's fine.
So, will that be in time if we pass it the second?
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah, the end of March is what she's looking for, so that works. But you know, once we really nail this down, I'd be able to tell her, this is the way we're going. Here's our draft law, it's on the agenda for, you know, whatever.
Right.
So that's.
Does everyone agree with me on this? I don't want to be 100% right
Yeah.
about the 2 and 5.
No,
Yeah, let me find out.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to go to executive session for personnel matters and real estate matters.
And maybe a collective bargaining issue. Let's add that there too.
Yes, and maybe collective bargaining, which we learned from our course the other night, some of us. Got to be specific.
So you made a motion, second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Is that a Robert's Rules course?
No, it was
I'm
land
gonna
use,
make a
land
motion
use,
for
but
a speedy, like, meeting.
they, yes.